Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it. Then let's evaluate together. The rain came down in sheets, hammering the cracked sidewalk outside Mama's kitchen, a small diner tucked in the heart of a bustling East Coast city. Ethan Caldwell stood under the flickering neon sign, his white dress shirt clinging to his skin, soaked through by the storm. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, and his breath came in short, sharp bursts. Not from the cold, but from the weight of the moment. Across from him, Lila Brooks stood just inside the diner's doorway, her arms crossed, her brown eyes blazing with a mix of hurt and fury. The rain blurred the world around them, but nothing could dull the intensity of her gaze. "Why didn't you tell me, Ethan?" Lila's voice trembled, cutting through the roar of the downpour. "All this time, every night, and you let me think you were just some guy? A regular Joe with a 9-to-5? You're a billionaire." Ethan took a step closer, rain streaming down his face. "Lila, I never meant to lie to you. I wanted to be someone real here, with you." "Real?" She laughed, sharp and bitter, but her eyes glistened with something softer. Betrayal, maybe, or longing. "You think hiding who you are is real? You think I wouldn't have seen you if I'd known?" "I was scared," he admitted, his voice low, almost lost in the rain. "Scared you'd look at me and see dollar signs instead of me." Lila's jaw tightened, and for a moment it seemed she might turn away, close the door, and end it all right there. But then her shoulders sagged, and she stepped out into the rain, closing the distance between them. Her curly hair, usually tied up in a neat bun, was starting to loosen, strands sticking to her cheeks. She was close now, so close he could smell the faint vanilla of her perfume, feel the warmth radiating from her despite the chill. "You should have trusted me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I deserved that much." "I know," Ethan said, his hands reaching for hers, tentative, like he was afraid she'd pull away. "I'm sorry, Lila. I'm so sorry." Her fingers hesitated, then curled around his, and in that moment, something shifted. The anger in her eyes softened, replaced by a raw, unspoken need. She stepped into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. The rain soaked them both, but neither cared. Her cheek pressed against his chest, and his hand rested gently on her back, their breaths sinking in the storm. For a heartbeat, the world was just them, two people clinging to something fragile, something true, under the weight of a secret finally exposed. How did they get here? How did a chance visit to a diner turn into this moment, where a billionaire and a waitress found themselves tangled in a connection neither could ignore? Stay with me, and I'll take you back to the beginning, to the night Ethan Caldwell walked into Mama's kitchen and saw Lila Brooks for the first time. This is a story about wealth, love, and the kind of connection that money can't buy. Hit that subscribe button now, and let's dive in. 6 months earlier, Ethan Caldwell was having the worst day of his life. At 38, he was the CEO of Apex Innovations, a tech empire that had made him one of the richest men in America. His face had graced the covers of Forbes and Wired, his name synonymous with power and success. But that morning, a multi-billion-dollar deal had collapsed. His board was breathing down his neck, and his assistant had quit after a particularly heated phone call. By 7 p.m., he was done. Done with meetings, done with emails, done with the sterile glass tower that bore his name. "Ray, pull over somewhere," Ethan muttered to his driver, slumping in the back of the sleek black SUV. "I need a coffee in 5 minutes where no one knows who I am." Ray, a wiry man in his 50s with a knack for reading Ethan's moods, glanced in the rearview mirror. "You sure, boss? This ain't exactly your usual scene." He nodded toward a neon sign glowing through the dusk. Mama's kitchen. The diner sat on a corner in a lively working-class neighborhood, its windows steamed up from the warmth inside. "Perfect," Ethan said, loosening his tie. "Just a coffee. In and out." Inside, Mama's kitchen was a world unto itself. The air was thick with the smell of cornbread and fried chicken, mingling with the bittersweet tang of fresh coffee. A jukebox in the corner played a low, bluesy jazz tune, and the walls were covered with framed photos, community events, smiling families, faded Polaroids of the diner's early days. The vinyl booths were worn but clean, and the counter was crowded with regulars. An old man in a flat cap nursing a slice of pie, a teenager scribbling in a notebook, a couple laughing over milkshakes. Ethan slid into a booth near the window, feeling out of place in his $2,000 suit. He was used to Michelin-starred restaurants, private chefs, and boardrooms where every word was calculated. This place, with its chipped mugs and handwritten specials board, was foreign territory. He was about to signal for a server when she appeared. Lila Brooks moved through the diner like she owned it, though she was just a waitress. Her curly hair was pulled into a high bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. Her skin was a warm brown, and her eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and kindness. She wore a simple black apron over jeans and a red t-shirt, but there was something magnetic about her. Maybe the way she laughed with a customer, or the way she tucked a pencil behind her ear with a practiced flick. "Hey there, stranger," she said, stopping at Ethan's booth with a pot of coffee in one hand. Her voice was warm, with a slight southern lilt that made Ethan sit up a little straighter. "You look like you've had a day. Coffee, black, no sugar, right?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "How'd you know?" She grinned, pouring the coffee without breaking eye contact. "You've got that I need caffeine to survive vibe, plus you're in a suit at 7 p.m. Either you're a lawyer or you just lost a big bet." He chuckled, the sound surprising him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed. "No bets, just a rough day at the office." "Mm-hmm." Lila set the pot down and leaned against the booth, studying him. "Well, you're in the right place. Mama's kitchen fixes all kinds of rough days. You want the meatloaf special? It's not gourmet, but it's honest." "Sure," Ethan said, more to keep her talking than because he was hungry. "Meatloaf it is." As she walked away, he watched her move, confident, graceful, like she was dancing to the jazz in the background. She stopped to chat with the teenager at the counter, asking about his math test, then teased the old man about eating too much pie. Ethan felt a pang of something he couldn't name. Envy, maybe, for the ease of this place, for the way people here seemed to see each other. "Yo, Lila, who's the suit?" a voice called from behind the counter. Tasha, another waitress, was wiping down the coffee machine, her braids swinging as she shot Ethan a skeptical look. She was younger than Lila, maybe late 20s, with a quick wit and a smile that said she missed nothing. "Just a new regular, Tasha?" Lila called back, winking at Ethan. "Be nice, or I'll make you mop the floor again." Tasha snorted. Man, he better tip well in that fancy get-up. Ethan smiled to himself, sipping the coffee. It was strong, slightly bitter. Nothing like the artisanal blends he was used to, but it grounded him. For the first time all day, he felt his shoulders relax. When Lila brought the meatloaf, she lingered, setting the plate down with a flourish. "All right, Mr. Office Guy, here's your dinner. Don't let the fancy suit fool me. You're gonna love this." "Mr. Office Guy?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, amused. "That's what you're calling me? Unless you give me a name, yeah." She crossed her arms, playful but expectant. "Ethan," he said, hesitating only a moment. He could have lied, could have been anyone, but something about her made him want to be honest, at least about this. "Ethan?" she repeated, like she was testing it out. "All right, Ethan. I'm Lila. Welcome to Mama's kitchen. You stick around, you might just become family." As she walked away, Ethan felt a spark, small but undeniable. It wasn't just her smile or the way her laugh filled the room. It was the way she'd looked at him, not as Ethan Caldwell, billionaire, but as a guy who needed a coffee and a kind word. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Over the next few weeks, Ethan became a regular. He traded his suits for jeans and flannel shirts, left his Rolex at home, and drove himself to the diner to avoid questions about Ray's SUV. Every night at 7:30 he'd claim the same booth, and Lila would bring his coffee without asking, her smile a little brighter each time. Mama's kitchen became his sanctuary. The jukebox played Ella Fitzgerald and Miles Davis. The air carried the scent of Clara's famous gumbo, and the regulars started nodding at him like he belonged. Clara, the diner's owner, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, her gray hair pulled back in a bun, her eyes sharp but kind. She'd built the diner decades ago, back when the neighborhood was tougher, and her stories about those days were legendary. "Ethan, you keep eating that meatloaf. You're gonna have to start washing dishes to pay it off," Clara teased one night, wiping her hands on her apron. "Deal," Ethan shot back, grinning. "But only if Lila teaches me how to make that gumbo." Lila, passing by with a tray, laughed. "Oh, you couldn't handle my gumbo, Ethan. That's a family secret passed down from my grandma." "Challenge accepted," he said, and the way her eyes sparkled made his chest tighten. He learned bits and pieces about her life. Lila had worked at Mama's kitchen for over a decade, raising her son Marvin on her own. Marvin was 20, studying engineering at the local college, and Lila's pride in him was fierce. She volunteered at a youth center, teaching kids to code, and dreamed of opening a community center where teens could learn skills and stay out of trouble. Her optimism, despite the long hours and financial struggles, was infectious. Ethan, in turn, shared carefully edited truths. He told her about growing up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs, about his love for old jazz records, about how he was terrible at cooking. He never mentioned Apex Innovations, the IPO that made him a billionaire at 32, or the penthouse he barely lived in. Those parts of his life felt like they belonged to someone else. One night, as Lila refilled his coffee, she leaned against the booth, her pencil tucked behind her ear. "So, Ethan, what do you do all day? You're always here at night like you're escaping something." He hesitated, stirring his coffee. "I work with numbers," he said, not entirely a lie. "Long hours, boring stuff. This place is my break." She studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Numbers, huh? You don't strike me as a desk jockey. There's more to you than that." Before he could respond, Tasha called her over, and the moment passed. But her words lingered. She saw him, really saw him, and it both thrilled and terrified him. The spark between them grew, subtle but undeniable. There were moments when Lila's hand brushed his as she set down a plate, sending a jolt through him. Once, when the diner was quiet, she sat across from him, sharing a slice of pie, and their knees touched under the table. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. Another night, as they locked up together, she adjusted his jacket collar, her fingers lingering a second too long, her breath warm against his cheek. "You're trouble, you know that?" she teased, but her smile was soft, almost shy. "Only the good kind," he replied, his voice low, and for a moment he thought she might lean in. But she stepped back, laughing, and the spell broke. Ethan knew he was falling for her, not just for her smile or her laugh, but for the way she made everyone in the diner feel like they mattered. He'd watched her slip extra food to a homeless man outside, calm an angry customer with a gentle word, help a kid with homework between orders. In a world where he was used to people wanting something from him, Lila gave without expecting anything back. But there was a shadow over his happiness. Every time Lila called him Ethan or teased him about his office job, he felt the weight of his secret. He told himself it was for the best. People changed when they knew you were rich. He'd seen it with friends, family, even his ex-fiancée. Money warped everything. But as he watched Lila hum a blues tune while pouring coffee, her pencil tucked into her hair, he wondered how long he could keep lying to someone who saw him so clearly. That's where our story begins. A man with everything, hiding in a diner to feel like he has something real. But secrets have a way of catching up, and Ethan's is about to change everything. If this moment between Ethan and Lila under the rain touched you, hit that subscribe button and join us for the rest of their journey. What would you do if you were Ethan? Tell the truth or keep the secret a little longer. Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep this story going. The jukebox at Mama's kitchen was cranking out a sultry Ella Fitzgerald tune, the kind that made you want to sway even if you were just wiping down a counter. The diner was buzzing tonight, alive with a warmth that went beyond the usual hum of conversation and clinking plates. Strings of fairy lights hung across the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the vinyl booths. The air was thick with the scent of Lila's homemade gumbo, simmering in the kitchen, and the promise of something special. It was jazz night, a fundraiser Lila had spent weeks planning to support the local youth center, and Mama's kitchen was packed with neighbors, friends, and a few curious newcomers. Ethan Caldwell slipped into his usual booth near the window, feeling more at home than he had any right to. Gone were the tailored suits and polished loafers of his CEO life. Tonight, he wore a faded blue flannel shirt, jeans, and a pair of sneakers he hadn't touched in years. His dark hair was slightly mussed, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was playing a part. Mama's kitchen had become his refuge over the past month, a place where he could be just Ethan, not the billionaire, not the guy on Forbes covers, but a guy who liked his coffee black and his meatloaf predictable. Lila Brooks was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of energy and grace. Her curly hair was loose tonight, bouncing as she moved, and she wore a simple red dress that hugged her curves just enough to make Ethan's pulse quicken. She was directing a teenager to set up a makeshift stage in the corner, laughing with Clara about the ancient microphone and checking the gumbo like it was a sacred ritual. Her brown eyes sparkled with purpose, and Ethan couldn't look away. "Yo, Ethan, you planning to sit there all night, or you gonna help?" Tasha called from the counter, her braids swinging as she balanced a tray of cornbread. Tasha, Lila's best friend and fellow waitress, had warmed to him slightly, but still shot him skeptical looks, like she was waiting for him to slip up. "I'm helping by staying out of the way," Ethan shot back, grinning. "Unless you need me to burn something." Lila overheard, turning with a playful smirk. "Oh, you're not getting off that easy, Mr. Office Guy. Grab those chairs from the back. We're short a few for the band." "Yes, ma'am," Ethan said, mock saluting. He caught the way her smile lingered, and it sent a warmth through him that had nothing to do with the diner's heat. As he hauled chairs from the storage room, Ethan marveled at how natural this felt. A month ago, he'd been a stranger in a suit, stumbling into Mama's kitchen after a brutal day. Now he knew the regulars by name: Mr. Jenkins, who always ordered pecan pie; Kayla, the high schooler who studied at the counter; Reggie, the homeless vet. Lila slipped extra food too. He knew Clara's gumbo recipe was a point of pride, that Tasha hated mopping, and that Lila hummed blues tunes when she thought no one was listening. Most of all, he knew the way Lila's laugh could make a bad day disappear. Jazz night was Lila's baby, a fundraiser to keep the youth center running. She told Ethan about it last week, her eyes bright with passion as she described teaching kids to code, helping them dream bigger than the streets outside. "It's not just about skills," she'd said, leaning against his booth. "It's about showing them they're worth something." Ethan had nodded, but inside he was reeling. In his world, worth was measured in stock options and mergers. Lila measured it in moments, in people. The diner was filling up now, the crowd a mix of young and old, black and white, locals and a few hipsters drawn by the promise of live music. A trio of musicians set up in the corner, a sax player, a drummer, and a bassist, all local legends who'd played with Clara back in the day. The first notes of a saxophone filled the air, smooth and soulful, and the chatter softened as people turned to listen. Ethan found himself roped into helping Lila serve gumbo, carrying bowls to tables while she darted between tasks. Their hands brushed once, twice as they passed plates, and each time, Ethan felt a spark. She caught his eye once, her lips twitching like she knew exactly what he was thinking. "Keep up, Ethan," she teased, nudging his shoulder. "You're slacking." "Me? I'm a pro," he said, balancing a bowl with exaggerated care. "This is Michelin star service right here." She laughed, the sound bright against the music, and Ethan thought he could live for that sound alone. The night hit its peak when a shy teenager named Jamal took the stage, clutching a guitar. Lila had been coaching him for weeks, and the crowd hushed as he strummed a tentative chord. His voice was raw but soulful, and by the end of the song, the diner erupted in applause. Jamal's grin was wider than the Mississippi, and Lila was right there, hugging him like a proud mom. "That's my guy," she called, clapping. Then, to Ethan's horror, she turned to him, mischief in her eyes. "All right, Ethan, your turn. Get up there and show us what you got." "What? No way," he said, holding up his hands. "I'm no singer." "Come on, man, don't leave Jamal hanging," Tasha shouted, and the crowd joined in, chanting his name. Ethan's face burned, but Lila's grin was irresistible. "Fine," he muttered, standing, "but you owe me a whole pan of cornbread for this." He climbed onto the stage, feeling like a kid at a talent show. The band, sensing his nerves, eased into a slow, familiar jazz standard. "My Funny Valentine." Ethan's voice was rough, far from professional, but he leaned into it, hamming it up for the crowd. By the second verse, people were swaying, and Lila was laughing so hard she had to lean against the counter. When he finished, the diner exploded in cheers, and Ethan bowed dramatically, his heart pounding with a joy he hadn't felt in years. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Office Guy," Lila said as he returned to his booth, her eyes warm. She slid a slice of pecan pie across the table, his favorite, though he'd never told her. "That was brave." "Brave or stupid," he said, still catching his breath. "You're a bad influence, Lila Brooks." "Maybe you need a little bad in your life," she replied, her voice low, teasing. For a moment, their eyes locked, and the air between them crackled. Ethan's fingers twitched, wanting to reach for her hand, but a customer called her away, and the moment passed. As the night wound down, the crowd thinned, leaving just the regulars and the soft hum of the jukebox. Ethan lingered, helping Lila stack chairs while Tasha and Clara cleaned the kitchen. The fairy lights cast a soft glow, and the diner felt like a cocoon, safe from the world outside. "You didn't have to stay, you know," Lila said, wiping down a table. "You've done enough for one night." "I wanted to," Ethan said, and he meant it. "This place, it's special. You make it special." She paused, her cloth still, and looked at him. "Careful, Ethan. You keep talking like that. I might start thinking you're more than just a guy with a coffee obsession." He smiled, but her words hit deeper than she knew. Every night he spent here, every laugh they shared, made it harder to keep his secret. He wasn't just Ethan, the guy who liked meatloaf and bad jazz. He was Ethan Caldwell, CEO, a man whose signature could move billions. And the longer he stayed, the more he feared losing this diner, this community, this woman who saw him for who he wanted to be. They worked in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clink of dishes and the faint jazz from the jukebox. At one point, Lila reached for a chair at the same time he did, their hands brushing. Neither pulled away. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused from years of work, and Ethan's heart thudded so loud he was sure she could hear it. "Sorry," she said, but she didn't move her hand, and her eyes held his, searching. "No need to be," he murmured, his voice husky. They stood there, inches apart, the air heavy with unspoken possibilities. Ethan could smell the vanilla of her perfume, see the flecks of gold in her eyes. He wanted to close the distance, to kiss her right there under the fairy lights, but something held him back. Maybe the weight of his lie, maybe the fear of breaking whatever this was. Lila broke the spell first, stepping back with a small, shaky laugh. "Your trouble, Ethan. I knew it the first day you walked in. Only the good kind," he said, echoing their earlier banter. But his voice was softer now, more serious. She shook her head, smiling, and turned to finish cleaning. But as Ethan watched her, he knew he was in deep. This wasn't just a crush or a fleeting fascination. Lila Brooks was rewriting the rules of his world, and he wasn't sure he could keep up. The night wasn't without its shadows. As Ethan helped Lila lock up, Tasha pulled her aside, her voice low but sharp. "I'm telling you, Lila, that guy's too good to be true. Nobody shows up every night just for meatloaf. You sure he's not playing you?" "Tasha, chill," Lila said, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "He's just nice. Not everyone's got an ulterior motive." Tasha said, unconvinced. "Just watch yourself, girl." Ethan caught the tail end of the conversation, his stomach twisting. Tasha wasn't wrong to be suspicious. He was hiding more than she could imagine. But as he glanced at Lila, laughing as she adjusted a sign on the door, he pushed the guilt down. He wasn't ready to lose this. Not yet. Outside, the city was quiet, the streets slick with the first drops of rain. Lila hugged her jacket tighter, turning to Ethan. "Thanks for tonight. You didn't have to sing, but you made Jamal's day." "Anytime," Ethan said, meaning it. "You need a ride home? It's getting wet out here." "Nah, I'm good. Marvin's picking me up." She paused, studying him. "You're all right, Ethan. Don't let Tasha scare you off." "Takes more than that to scare me," he said. But as she walked away, her figure disappearing into the night, he felt a pang of unease. He was falling for her, hard, and every step deeper into Mama's kitchen was a step closer to the truth catching up. Mama's kitchen was quieter than usual on a Tuesday night, the kind of quiet that felt like a pause before something big. The jukebox hummed a low blues tune, and the smell of Clara's cornbread lingered in the air, mixing with the faint bitterness of coffee brewing behind the counter. The fairy lights from jazz night were gone, but the diner still held a warmth that Ethan Caldwell had come to crave. He sat in his usual booth, a half-eaten plate of meatloaf in front of him, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows. Across the room, Lila Brooks moved with her usual grace, refilling coffee for Mr. Jenkins and teasing Kayla about her latest crush. Ethan watched her, a smile tugging at his lips. 2 months into his nightly visits to Mama's kitchen, and he still couldn't get enough of her. It wasn't just her laugh or the way her brown eyes sparkled when she teased him. It was the way she carried herself, strong, unapologetic, like she'd faced the world's worst and come out swinging. She was raising a son, working double shifts, volunteering at the youth center, and still dreaming of a community center for kids like the ones she mentored. Ethan had built a tech empire, but Lila was building something real, something that mattered. He sipped his coffee, the familiar bitterness grounding him. Mama's kitchen had become his anchor, a place where he could shed the weight of being Ethan Caldwell, billionaire CEO of Apex Innovations. Here, he was just Ethan, the guy who liked his meatloaf with extra gravy and told terrible jokes about spreadsheets. But the longer he stayed, the heavier his secret felt. Every time Lila called him Mr. Office Guy or asked about his day, he danced around the truth, offering half answers about working with numbers. She deserved better, but he wasn't ready to risk losing the way she looked at him, like he was just a person, not a portfolio. Tonight, though, something was different. Lila seemed distracted, her smile a FaceTiming quick glances at her phone between orders. Ethan caught her frowning at the scheduling board near the kitchen, where her name was scrawled next to double shifts 3 nights this week. He'd noticed her limping slightly last week, and when he'd asked, she'd brushed it off with a tired smile. Just picked up some extra hours at the warehouse. Marvin's tuition ain't cheap. That conversation had stuck with Ethan. Marvin, Lila's 20-year-old son, was studying engineering at the local college, a fact Lila mentioned with fierce pride. But the weight of those tuition bills was etched in the lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was watching. Ethan had the means to fix it. A single phone call could erase her debt, cover Marvin's tuition, even save the diner from the rising property taxes Clara grumbled about. But he knew Lila. She was proud, independent, the kind of woman who'd rather work 3 jobs than accept a handout. Still, the idea of helping her, of lightening that load, gnawed at him. The diner's door swung open, and Marvin walked in, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He was tall, with Lila's warm brown skin and a quiet intensity that reminded Ethan of her. He nodded at Ethan, his expression polite but guarded, before heading to the counter where Lila was wiping down the coffee machine. "Hey, Ma," Marvin said, leaning over the counter. "Got some news." Lila's face lit up, her exhaustion fading. "Spill it, baby. Don't keep me waiting." Marvin grinned, a rare crack in his serious demeanor. "Got a scholarship. Full ride for the rest of my degree. Some anonymous donor set up a fund for STEM students." Lila's hands froze on the counter, her eyes widening. "What?" "Marvin, are you serious?" "Dead serious," he said, pulling out a letter from his backpack. "Came through today. I'm set, Ma. No more loans." Lila let out a whoop, rounding the counter to pull Marvin into a hug. The diner erupted in cheers. Mr. Jenkins raised his coffee mug, Kayla clapped, and even Clara poked her head out of the kitchen, smiling. Ethan watched from his booth, his heart swelling. He'd made a call last week, pulling strings with a foundation he quietly funded. The scholarship wasn't just for Marvin. It covered a dozen students, but Marvin was the reason Ethan had pushed it through. Seeing Lila's joy, her arms around her son, made every second of guilt worth it. "That's my boy," Lila said, kissing Marvin's cheek. "I knew you'd make it happen." Marvin laughed, embarrassed. "It's not me, Ma. It's the donor. Whoever they are, they're changing lives." Lila's smile faltered, just for a second, and Ethan's stomach twisted. She glanced around the diner, her eyes landing on him. There was something in her gaze. Gratitude, yes, but also a flicker of suspicion. She was too smart not to notice how convenient this was, how perfectly timed. Later, as the diner emptied out, Ethan lingered, helping Lila stack chairs. The jukebox was off. The only sounds the hum of the fridge and the occasional car passing outside. Lila was quieter than usual, her movements deliberate, like she was working through something in her head. "You okay?" Ethan asked, setting a chair down. "You seem off." She paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm good. Just Marvin's scholarship. It's a miracle, you know, but it's almost too perfect." Ethan's throat tightened. He forced a casual shrug. "Sometimes good things happen, Lila. Marvin deserves it." "Yeah, he does," she said, but her eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Ethan, you know anything about this? I mean, you're here every night, always asking about Marvin. And now this?" The air between them shifted, heavy with unspoken questions. Ethan's pulse quickened, but he held her gaze, keeping his expression neutral. "Me? I'm just a guy who likes meatloaf," he said, trying for a smile. "I don't have that kind of pull." Lila didn't laugh. She crossed her arms, her pencil still tucked behind her ear, a habit Ethan found endlessly endearing. "Don't play me, Ethan. I'm not some naive kid. You're not just a desk jockey, are you?" He wanted to tell her. The words were right there. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. I made the scholarship happen. I've got more money than I know what to do with." But the memory of his ex-fiancée, the way her eyes changed when she saw his bank account, stopped him. He couldn't bear to see that look on Lila's face. "Lila, I'm just me," he said, his voice softer now. "I promise." She held his gaze for a long moment, then sighed, shaking her head. "You better not be lying to me, Ethan. I don't do secrets." The words hit like a punch. She turned away, grabbing a rag to wipe the counter, and Ethan felt the distance between them grow, even though she was only a few feet away. The next night, the tension lingered. Lila was still warm, still smiled when she brought his coffee, but there was a guarded edge to her. Ethan hated it, hated knowing he'd put it there. He tried to keep things light, joking about the meatloaf being award-worthy, but her laugh was half-hearted. Tasha, as usual, wasn't helping. She cornered Lila in the kitchen, her voice carrying just enough for Ethan to overhear. "I'm telling you, Lila, that scholarship's fishy. And your boy Ethan, he's too slick. Nobody hangs out here every night unless they're up to something." "Tasha, stop," Lila said, but her tone lacked conviction. "He's a good guy." "Good guys don't dodge questions," Tasha shot back. "You're too trusting, girl." Ethan pretended to read the specials board, his chest tight. Tasha wasn't wrong. She was closer to the truth than she knew, but admitting it now, after weeks of half-truths, felt impossible. He'd dug himself a hole, and every day he didn't climb out, it got deeper. Clara, the diner's owner, noticed the shift too. She caught Ethan's eye as he paid his bill, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression unreadable. "You're stirring up trouble, aren't you?" she said, half teasing, half serious. "Me? Never," Ethan said, forcing a grin, but Clara's knowing look stayed with him as he left. The real breaking point came a few nights later, after another double shift left Lila limping again. Ethan couldn't stand it. He stayed late, helping her lock up, the diner empty except for the two of them. The air was cool, the neon sign outside casting a pink glow through the windows. Lila was wiping down the counter, her movements slow, exhausted. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said, glancing at him as he swept the floor. "You're a customer, not a busboy." "I like it," Ethan said, and he meant it. "Keeps me honest." She snorted, but her smile was genuine, the first real one he'd seen in days. They worked in silence for a while, the rhythm familiar, almost intimate. At one point, Lila reached for a broom at the same time he did, their hands brushing. The touch was electric, and neither pulled away. Her skin was warm, her fingers calloused, and Ethan's heart raced. "Lila," he started, his voice low, but she stepped closer, cutting him off. "Don't," she said, but her eyes were soft, searching his. "Just don't say anything, unless it's the truth." The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. Ethan could smell her vanilla perfume, see the way her breath hitched. He wanted to kiss her, to tell her everything, but the fear of losing her stopped him. Instead, he leaned in, just enough to adjust her apron strap, his fingers grazing her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered shut for a second, and he thought she might lean into him, but then she stepped back, her expression conflicted. "We should keep this simple, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't handle complicated right now." He nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, simple." But as she turned away, locking the door, Ethan knew nothing about this was simple. He'd crossed a line with the scholarship, and Lila's trust was slipping through his fingers. The diner, once his sanctuary, felt like a stage where he was playing a role he couldn't sustain. Outside, the city was alive with headlights and distant sirens. Ethan stood under the neon sign, his breath visible in the cool air. He thought of Lila's words, "I don't do secrets," and the scholarship letter Marvin had shown her. He'd wanted to help, to give her a break, but he'd done it in the shadows, without her consent. It was a mistake, and he was starting to see how much it might cost him. Mama's Kitchen was more than a diner to Lila. It was her family, her community, her heart. And Ethan, with his hidden billions and good intentions, was threatening to break it. The question was, could he fix it before it was too late? The air in Mama's Kitchen was thick with the scent of fried chicken and the low hum of a Billie Holiday tune from the jukebox. It was a Thursday night, busier than usual, with the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversation filling the diner. The neon sign outside buzzed softly, casting a pink glow across the vinyl booths. Ethan Caldwell sat in his usual spot, his flannel shirt slightly rumpled, a cup of black coffee cooling in front of him. He was trying to focus on the meatloaf on his plate, but his eyes kept drifting to Lila Brooks. Lila moved through the diner with her trademark grace, her curly hair pulled into a high bun, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Her red apron was tied over jeans and a black t-shirt, and her smile was warm as she chatted with regulars, Mr. Jenkins about his grandkids, Kayla about her college applications. But Ethan could see the strain in her, the way her shoulders tensed when she thought no one was watching. The scholarship for her son, Marvin, had eased some of her financial burdens, but the double shifts and warehouse work were taking a toll. And then there was the distance between them, a subtle but growing wall since she'd questioned him about the scholarship a week ago. Ethan sipped his coffee, the bitterness mirroring his mood. He'd been coming to Mama's Kitchen for 3 months now, trading his billionaire life for these nightly escapes. Here, he wasn't Ethan Caldwell, CEO of Apex Innovations, whose decisions moved markets. He was just Ethan, the guy who helped stack chairs and laughed at Lila's jokes. But the scholarship he'd secretly arranged for Marvin had cracked something in their connection. Lila's suspicion that he wasn't just a desk jockey hung between them like a storm cloud. He wanted to tell her the truth, to lay it all bare, but every time he opened his mouth, the fear of losing her stopped him. Tonight, though, the storm was about to break. Tasha, Lila's best friend and fellow waitress, was behind the counter, her braids swinging as she poured coffee. She'd never fully warmed to Ethan, her sharp eyes catching every dodge in his vague answers about his job. Tonight she was quieter than usual, her gaze flickering between Ethan and her phone. Ethan tried to ignore it, but a knot of unease settled in his stomach. Lila stopped by his booth, refilling his coffee with a small smile. "You're quiet tonight, Mr. Office Guy. Rough day with those numbers of yours?" He forced a grin, leaning back. "Just trying to keep up with you. You're running this place like a pro." "Flattery won't get you free pie," she teased, but her eyes lingered on him, searching. "You sure you're okay? You've been off lately." Before he could answer, Tasha's voice cut through the diner, sharp and loud. "Lila, you need to see this, now." Lila frowned, wiping her hands on her apron as she walked to the counter. Tasha thrust her phone at her, her expression a mix of triumph and anger. "I knew it. I knew he wasn't just some random dude." Ethan's heart sank. He couldn't see the screen, but he didn't need to. The way Lila's face changed, her brows knitting, her lips parting in shock, told him everything. The diner seemed to quiet, the chatter fading as if the room itself was holding its breath. Lila's eyes darted to him, wide and betrayed, and Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. "Lila, what's wrong?" Clara called from the kitchen, sensing the tension. The older woman stepped out, her gray hair in a bun, her apron dusted with flour. Lila didn't answer. She walked toward Ethan's booth, her steps slow, deliberate. Tasha's phone clutched in her hand. The regulars, Mr. Jenkins, Kayla, a couple in the corner, watched, their conversations stalling. When Lila reached him, she set the phone down with a quiet thud, the screen glowing with an article from a business news site. Ethan's own face stared back at him, a polished headshot from a Forbes feature. The headline read, Apex Innovations CEO Ethan Caldwell, the billionaire behind the tech boom. Ethan Caldwell, Lila said, her voice low, not a question but a statement. Not just Ethan, the guy who works with numbers. Ethan Caldwell, billionaire, CEO, one of the richest men in the country. Ethan's mouth went dry. He opened it to speak, but no words came. The diner, his sanctuary, felt like a stage where he'd been caught in the spotlight. Lila, I can explain, he started, but she cut him off, her voice rising. Explain? You've been coming here every night for 3 months, Ethan. 3 months of coffee, meatloaf, and I'm just a regular guy. You let me think. She stopped, her voice cracking, and Ethan saw the hurt in her eyes, raw and unguarded. You let me think you were someone I could trust. The words hit harder than any boardroom showdown. Ethan stood, his hands raised, desperate to bridge the gap between them. I am someone you can trust. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to change this. Us. People look at me differently when they know, Lila. You don't know what it's like. Don't you dare, she snapped, stepping closer, her eyes blazing. Don't tell me what I don't know. You think I haven't dealt with people who think they can buy their way into my life? You think I haven't earned every single thing I have? She gestured around the diner, her voice trembling with pride. This place, my son, my dreams, they're mine because I fought for them. And you sat here, lying to my face. Tasha crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. Told you, Lila. He's been playing you from day one. Tasha, enough, Clara said sharply, stepping between them. Her eyes locked on Ethan, stern, but not unkind. You got something to say, son. Now's the time. Ethan's chest tightened. The diner was silent now, every eye on him. He looked at Lila, her arms crossed, her jaw set, and knew this was his chance, maybe his only chance, to salvage what they had. Lila, I never meant to hurt you. I came here by accident, that first night. I was lost. My life, it's all numbers and deals and people who want something from me. But here, with you, I felt real for the first time in years. Your kindness, your laugh, this place, it's the only thing that's felt like home. Lila's expression softened for a fraction of a second, but then her eyes hardened again. So you lied to feel real? You think that's fair to me? To Marvin? To everyone here who welcomed you? I didn't lie about who I am, he said, his voice urgent. Not the important parts, the way I feel about you, about this place. That's real. Feel about me? Lila's laugh was bitter, but her eyes glistened. You don't get to say that when you've been hiding who you are. You don't get to play the hero when you're the one who broke my trust. The words cut deep, and Ethan felt the weight of every choice he'd made, every half-truth, every dodge. He took a step toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. I need you to leave, Ethan, she said, her voice steady now, though it cost her. I can't do this. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The diner seemed to close in around him, the warmth he'd come to love now suffocating. He wanted to argue, to beg, but the look in her eyes told him it was useless. He nodded, grabbing his jacket from the booth. I'm sorry, Lila, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. More than you know. As he walked out, the bell above the door jingled, a sound that had once felt like a welcome but now marked the end of something. The night air was cool, the city alive with headlights and distant laughter, but Ethan felt emptier than he ever had. Inside Mama's kitchen, Lila stood frozen, Tasha's phone still on the table. The regulars resumed their conversations, but their voices were hushed, respectful of the storm that had just passed. Clara put a hand on Lila's shoulder, her touch steadying. "You all right, baby?" Clara asked, her voice soft. Lila shook her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know, Clara. I thought he was different." "He might still be," Clara said, her tone careful. "But you're right to call him out. Trust is earned, not bought." Tasha, still fuming, crossed her arms. "I knew he was trouble. All that I'm just a guy nonsense. Billionaires don't hang out in diners unless they want something." "Stop it, Tasha," Lila said, her voice sharp. "I don't need you piling on. I need to think." She grabbed a rag and started wiping the counter, her movements mechanical, but her mind was racing. She'd felt something with Ethan, something real. His quiet humor, the way he listened when she talked about her dreams, the way his hand brushed hers and made her heart skip. But now she didn't know who he was. The man she'd laughed with, almost kissed, was a stranger with a secret life she couldn't begin to understand. The next few days were a blur. Lila threw herself into work, taking extra shifts to avoid thinking about Ethan. Marvin noticed her mood, his brow furrowing when she brushed off his questions. "Ma, you sure you're okay? You've been quiet since that scholarship thing." "I'm fine, baby," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But Marvin wasn't buying it. He'd met Ethan a few times, and while he'd been wary, something about the guy seemed too polished. He'd seen the way his mom lit up around him. "Is this about that dude from the diner? Ethan?" Lila sighed, setting down her coffee mug. "It's complicated, Marvin. Let's just say he wasn't who I thought." Marvin's jaw tightened. "He hurt you?" "No," she said quickly. "Not like that. He lied. And I don't know how to trust him now." Marvin nodded, his expression softening. "You'll figure it out, Ma. You always do." But Lila wasn't so sure. She kept replaying the confrontation, the hurt in Ethan's eyes when she told him to leave. Part of her wanted to believe him, to believe the man who'd sung jazz with Jamal and helped her lock up was real. But the other part, the part that had fought for every inch of her life, couldn't forgive the lie. Meanwhile, Ethan was unraveling. He threw himself into work, signing deals and chairing meetings, but his mind was back at Mama's kitchen. Ray, his driver and confidant, noticed the change. "You look like you lost your best friend, boss," Ray said one evening, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Maybe I did," Ethan muttered, staring out the window. "I messed up, Ray. Big time." "Then fix it," Ray said, his tone matter-of-fact. "You got all the money in the world, but that don't mean squat if you don't show up as a man." Ethan nodded, but fixing it felt impossible. Lila's words, "I need you to leave," echoed in his head, a reminder of how badly he'd misjudged. He'd thought keeping his identity secret would protect what they had, but all it did was prove he didn't trust her to see him for who he was. The diner wasn't the same without Ethan. The booth by the window stayed empty, and Lila caught herself glancing at it, half expecting to see him there with his coffee and his quiet smile. Clara tried to nudge her toward forgiveness, sharing stories of her own mistakes in love. But Lila wasn't ready. Tasha, on the other hand, was unrelenting, convinced Ethan was a rich guy slumming it for kicks. But the truth was more complicated, and Lila knew it. Ethan hadn't just been a customer. He'd been a friend, maybe more, and the hole he'd left was bigger than she wanted to admit. The question was, could she ever let him back in? The neon sign outside Mama's kitchen flickered, its pink glow weaker than usual, as if it knew the diner was on borrowed time. Inside, the air was heavy, not with the usual warmth of cornbread and coffee, but with a quiet dread. The jukebox was silent, the vinyl booths half empty, and the regulars spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the scheduling board where Clara had scrawled fewer shifts. It was a rainy Tuesday night, and the city outside seemed to press in, its skyscrapers and construction cranes a reminder of the changes creeping closer. Lila Brooks stood behind the counter, wiping it down for the third time, her movements mechanical. Her curly hair was pulled into a tight bun, her red apron tied loosely over jeans and a faded t-shirt. The past week had been a blur since she'd kicked Ethan Caldwell out of the diner, his billionaire identity exposed like a bomb dropped in the middle of her life. She'd thrown herself into work, dodging Tasha's "I told you so's" and Clara's gentle nudging, but the ache in her chest hadn't eased. Ethan's absence left a hole, his empty booth by the window a constant reminder of the trust he'd broken. But tonight, a bigger threat loomed. Clara had called a staff meeting after closing, her voice tight as she gathered Lila, Tasha, and the part-time cook, Jamal, in the kitchen. The news hit like a punch. Mama's Kitchen was 3 months from closing. Property taxes had skyrocketed after the city rezoned the block for luxury condos, and developers were circling like vultures. Clara, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes weary, laid it out plain. "We've got maybe 90 days, 4 if we stretch every penny. After that, this place is gone." Lila's heart sank. Mama's Kitchen wasn't just a job. It was her family, her anchor. Her mother had waited tables here before her health failed. Marvin had bussed tables as a teenager. Lila had found her purpose here, serving gumbo and dreams to a community that needed both. Losing it felt like losing a piece of herself. "We'll fight it," Lila said, her voice fierce despite the tears prickling her eyes. "We can fundraise, talk to the city, something." Clara put a hand on her shoulder, her touch steady but sad. "We'll try, baby. But it's an uphill battle. These developers don't play fair." Tasha crossed her arms, her braids swinging. "This is gentrification, plain and simple. They want our neighborhood, our history, gone so they can build glass towers for rich folks." Lila nodded, her jaw tight. She thought of Ethan, the billionaire who'd sat in her diner, pretending to be one of them. Was he part of this world, moving money and power while places like Mama's Kitchen crumbled? The thought made her stomach churn. Across town, Ethan Caldwell was drowning in his own world. His penthouse office at Apex Innovations was all glass and steel, a stark contrast to the warmth of Mama's Kitchen. He stood by the window, staring at the city skyline, his tie loosened, a glass of scotch untouched on his desk. The past week had been hell. Meetings, deals, and conference calls filled his days, but his mind was stuck on Lila, her hurt eyes, her voice telling him to leave. He'd thought keeping his identity secret would protect what they had, but all it did was prove he didn't trust her. Ray, his driver and confidant, had called him out the night before, his voice blunt over the phone. "You love her, don't you? Then stop hiding and fix this, man. Money ain't gonna do it." Ethan knew Ray was right, but fixing it felt impossible. He'd crossed a line with the scholarship for Marvin, and Lila's reaction to his identity had shown him how deeply he'd misjudged. Still, he couldn't let go. He'd hired a private investigator, not to spy on Lila, but to understand her world better, to find ways to help without overstepping again. The report came back with details that broke his heart. Lila's mortgage struggles, her mother's medical bills, the diner's looming closure. Each fact was a reminder of how much she carried and how little he'd done to earn her trust. When he learned about Mama's Kitchen, something snapped. The diner wasn't just a place. It was Lila's heart, her community soul. He couldn't let it disappear. Late one night, he made a call, setting up a foundation to preserve historic local businesses. By morning, his team had bought the diner's building and secured a 99-year lease at the current rate, ensuring Mama's Kitchen could stay open. It was a quiet move, channeled through the foundation to keep his name out of it, but Ethan knew it was a risk. Lila didn't want his money. She wanted his honesty. The news broke a week later, not through Ethan's careful planning, but through a local news article. Lila was at Mama's kitchen, serving coffee to Mr. Jenkins when Tasha rushed in, waving her phone. "Lila, you gotta see this. Someone bought the building. Mama's kitchen's saved." Lila's heart leaped, but her relief was short-lived. Tasha read the article aloud, her voice faltering as she reached the key detail. The purchase was funded by the Caldwell Foundation, with Ethan Caldwell listed as a board member. The diner went quiet, the regulars exchanging glances. Clara's eyes narrowed, and Lila felt the air leave her lungs. "Ethan," she whispered, her hands trembling. It wasn't just the scholarship. He'd gone behind her back again, using his money to fix her life without asking. The betrayal stung worse than his hidden identity, because this time he'd known how much trust meant to her. Tasha slammed her phone down. "I told you, Lila. He's playing God with our lives. Thinks he can buy us like one of his companies." "Enough, Tasha!" Lila snapped, but her voice shook. She grabbed her jacket, her mind racing. She needed answers, and she wasn't waiting for Ethan to show up with another half-truth. The Apex Innovations Tower loomed over the city, its glass facade reflecting the stormy sky. Lila stood in the lobby, her old sneakers squeaking on the marble floor, her denim jacket out of place among the suits and briefcases. The receptionist eyed her skeptically, but Lila's determination was unshakable. "I need to see Ethan Caldwell, now." Up on the 40th floor, Ethan was in a meeting, his board droning on about quarterly projections. When his assistant buzzed him about a Lila Brooks in the lobby, his heart stopped. He excused himself, ignoring the board's murmurs, and met her in his office, the city sprawling below them. Lila stood by the window, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing. She looked small in the vast office, but her presence filled the room. "You bought the diner," she said, her voice low, dangerous. "After everything, you went behind my back again." Ethan's throat tightened. He'd expected this, but seeing her here, in his world, made it real. "Lila, I didn't mean—" "Don't!" She cut him off, stepping closer. "Don't tell me what you meant. You think you can just throw money at my life and make it better? You think I'm some charity case you can save?" "No," he said, his voice urgent. "It's not about that. Mama's kitchen. It's your heart, Lila. It's this city's heart. I couldn't let it go." "You don't get to decide that," she shouted, her voice echoing off the glass. "You don't get to play hero when you're the one who lied. You knew how I felt about trust, and you still did this. Why, Ethan? Why can't you just be honest with me?" The question hung between them, raw and exposed. Ethan took a step toward her, his hands outstretched. "Because I love you," he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. "I love you, Lila, and I couldn't stand watching you carry all this alone. I thought I was helping, but I see now. I was wrong. I should have talked to you, trusted you. I'm sorry." Lila's eyes widened, her breath catching. For a moment, the anger in her face softened, replaced by something vulnerable, something that mirrored the longing in his voice. But then she shook her head, stepping back. "Love doesn't work like this, Ethan. It's not about fixing things in the shadows. It's about showing up, being real, even when it's messy." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm trying, Lila. I want to be that guy, the one you can trust. But I don't know how to do this without screwing it up." "Then figure it out," she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. "But don't expect me to wait around while you do." She turned, walking out, leaving Ethan alone in the sterile office, the city lights mocking him from below. Back at Mama's kitchen, Lila threw herself into work. but the victory of the diner's survival was bittersweet. Clara tried to lift her spirits, sharing stories of the diner's early days, but Lila's mind was on Ethan, his confession, the raw honesty in his eyes. She hated how much it hurt, how much she missed him, even now. Marvin, picking her up after a shift, sensed her turmoil. "Ma, you're killing yourself over this guy. If he's not worth it, let him go." "It's not that simple," Lila said, staring out the car window. He's more than I thought, but I don't know if I can trust him." Marvin sighed, his voice gentle. "You always taught me to give people a chance, but not at the cost of yourself. You deserve better than secrets." Lila nodded, but her heart was torn. Ethan's love had felt real, but it came wrapped in lies. Could she separate the man from the money? Or was that just another dream she couldn't afford? Tasha, meanwhile, was relentless. "He's a billionaire, Lila. They don't change. He'll keep pulling strings, thinking he owns you." But Clara, wiping down the counter, offered a different perspective. "People mess up, Lila. Doesn't mean they can't learn. Question is, do you think he's worth the chance?" Lila didn't have an answer. The diner was safe, but her heart wasn't. And Ethan, the man who'd sat in her booth and sung jazz with her kids, was still out there, carrying a piece of her she wasn't sure she could take back. Ethan wasn't giving up. He sat in his penthouse, the city sprawling below, and made a decision. No more secrets, no more shadows. If he wanted Lila back, he had to show up as himself, flaws, billions, and all. But the clock was ticking, and Mama's kitchen wasn't out of danger yet. The developers were fighting the lease, and Ethan knew this was his chance to prove he could be the man Lila needed, not by buying her world, but by standing in it. The rain had stopped, but the streets outside Mama's kitchen were still slick, reflecting the neon glow of the diner's sign. Inside, the air was warm, filled with the familiar scents of cornbread and coffee, but there was a new energy tonight. The jukebox played a soft Nina Simone tune, and the vinyl booths were crowded with regulars celebrating the news. Mama's kitchen was safe, its building secured by a 99-year lease. Laughter and chatter filled the space, a stark contrast to the despair of weeks past. Yet Lila Brooks, behind the counter, felt a quiet ache amidst the joy. Her curly hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders, and her red apron was tied neatly over a green dress she'd bought on a whim. She poured coffee for Mr. Jenkins, teased Kayla about her college essays, and smiled through the congratulations from neighbors. But her eyes kept drifting to the empty booth by the window, where Ethan Caldwell used to sit. It had been 2 weeks since their confrontation in his office, since he'd said, "I love you," and she'd walked away, her heart torn between hurt and longing. The diner was saved, but the cost, losing Ethan, felt heavier than she'd expected. Lila wiped the counter, her movements slow, her mind replaying that night. His voice, raw and desperate, had stayed with her. "I love you, Lila. I want to be the guy you can trust." She'd wanted to believe him, but the scholarships, the diner, the secrets, they'd built a wall she wasn't sure she could climb. Still, she missed him. The way he'd sung jazz with Jamal, helped her lock up, looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Could she forgive him? Should she? Clara, the diner's owner, caught her staring at the booth. "You're thinking about him, aren't you?" she said, her gray hair pulled back, her eyes sharp but kind. Lila sighed, setting down her rag. "I don't know what I'm thinking, Clara. He lied, he meddled, but he also saved this place. I'm all mixed up." "Love's messy like that," Clara said, patting her hand. "But you gotta ask yourself, what's your heart saying?" Lila didn't answer, but Clara's words lingered as she served the last customers of the night. Across town, Ethan Caldwell was trying to move on. His penthouse was silent. The city skyline a cold backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He'd thrown himself into work, signing deals and dodging the board's questions about his distractions. But every night, he thought of Lila, her laugh, her strength, the way her hand felt in his under the rain. He'd messed up, big time, and Ray's blunt advice echoed in his head. Show up as a man, not a billionaire. Ethan had taken it to heart. He'd stepped back from Mama's kitchen, letting the foundation handle the lease without his name attached. But he couldn't stop thinking about Lila's dream, a community center for kids like Jamal and Marvin. So, quietly, he'd funded a training program through Apex Innovations, offering free tech courses to youth in Lila's neighborhood. It wasn't for her. It was for the community she loved. But he hoped, somehow, it would show her he'd listened. The turning point came unexpectedly. Lila was at the youth center teaching a coding class when the director pulled her aside. "We got a new program starting," he said, handing her a flyer. "Tech training, fully funded, with spots for all our kids. Guess who's behind it? Apex Innovations. Ethan Caldwell himself signed off." Lila's breath caught. She stared at the flyer, her heart racing. This wasn't a secret donation or a backdoor fix. The program was public, transparent, and tied to the kids she'd dedicated her life to. Ethan hadn't asked for credit, hadn't reached out to claim her gratitude. He'd done it because it mattered, to her community. She sat in the empty classroom, the flyer in her hands, and felt the wall around her heart crack. Ethan wasn't perfect. He'd lied, he'd overstepped, but he was trying, really trying, to be the man he'd promised. And she couldn't deny what she felt. The spark when their hands brushed, the warmth of his voice, the way he'd stood in her world and made it better, even when he stumbled. That night, Lila made a decision. She called Ethan, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number he'd given her months ago. When he answered, his voice was cautious, hopeful. "Lila, I want to talk," she said, her voice steady. "Not at the diner. Somewhere neutral. Can you meet me at the park tomorrow? Noon?" "Yes," he said, no hesitation. "I'll be there." The park was a green oasis in the city, its trees heavy with late summer leaves, the air carrying the scent of grass and hot dogs from a nearby vendor. Lila sat on a bench overlooking a small pond, her homemade sandwiches wrapped in foil beside her. She wore jeans and a white blouse, her hair loose, her heart pounding. When Ethan arrived, she almost didn't recognize him. No flannel, no pretense. He wore a tailored blazer over a simple shirt, his dark hair neat, his eyes nervous but open. This was Ethan Caldwell, billionaire, but also the man who'd sung jazz and swept her floors. "Hey," he said, sitting beside her, leaving a careful space between them. "You look good." She smiled, a little shy. "You clean up nice yourself. Thought you only owned flannel now." He chuckled, the sound easing the tension. "I figured it was time to stop hiding." Lila handed him a sandwich, her fingers brushing his, sending a familiar spark through her. "Turkey and avocado, don't say I never cooked for you." "Never," he said, unwrapping it with a grin. "You're full of surprises, Lila Brooks." They ate in companionable silence, the pond glittering under the sun. Then Lila took a deep breath, setting her sandwich down. "I saw the program at the youth center. Tech training, funded by you. No strings, no secrets. Why'd you do it?" Ethan met her gaze, his expression earnest. "Because it's what you believe in. Those kids, this neighborhood, they're your heart. I wanted to support that, not control it. And I wanted to show you I'm learning." "No more shadows." Lila studied him, her heart softening. "You hurt me, Ethan. The lies, the scholarship, the diner. You took choices away from me. That's not love." "I know," he said, his voice low, raw. I was wrong. I thought I was helping, but I was scared. Scared you'd see the money and not me. I've spent my life watching people change when they know what I'm worth. But you're different. You saw me when I was just a guy in a booth, and I didn't want to lose that. She nodded, her throat tight. I did see you, the guy who helped Jamal, who laughed at my terrible coffee puns. But I need the whole you, Ethan. No half-truths. Can you do that? Yes, he said, his hand reaching for hers, tentative. I want to be in your life, Lila, as equals. No fixing, no secrets, just us. Her fingers curled around his, warm and steady. Then we start over, clean slate. But you mess up again, Ethan Caldwell, and I'm done. He smiled, relief flooding his face. Deal. They talked for hours, the sandwiches forgotten. Lila shared her plans for the community center, asking his advice, not as a billionaire, but as a partner. Ethan opened up about his childhood, the pressure of his wealth, the loneliness he'd carried. For the first time, their worlds felt aligned, not parallel. Weeks later, Mama's Kitchen hosted a community night, a celebration of its survival and a fundraiser for Lila's dream. The diner was alive with music, laughter, and the smell of gumbo. Fairy lights twinkled, and the jukebox played a lively jazz tune. Lila moved through the crowd, her green dress catching the light, her smile radiant. Ethan was there, not in his old booth, but mingling, chatting with Mr. Jenkins and helping Jamal set up a laptop for a coding demo. Marvin, home from college, watched Ethan with cautious approval. He's all right, Ma, he said, nudging Lila, but I'm keeping an eye on him. You do that, Lila said, laughing, but her eyes were on Ethan, who was laughing with Clara over a story about her old jazz days. As the night wound down, the band slowed to a ballad, and couples took to the makeshift dance floor. Ethan approached Lila, his hand extended. Dance with me. She hesitated, then smiled, taking his hand. They swayed under the fairy lights, her head resting against his chest, his arms steady around her. The world faded, the diner, the crowd, the past. It was just them, moving to the music, their breaths sinking like they had in the rain. You're not bad at this, Lila murmured, her voice teasing but soft. You make it easy, he said, his lips brushing her forehead. The kiss was gentle, a promise, and Lila felt her heart settle. This was real, not perfect, but real. Months later, the Lila Brooks Community Center opened its doors in her old neighborhood, a space for kids to learn, dream, and belong. Lila ran it with fierce dedication, her vision brought to life. Ethan provided resources but followed her lead, proving his commitment to their partnership. Marvin joined Apex Innovations as an intern, earning his place through talent, not favors. And Mama's Kitchen? It thrived, a beacon of community in a changing city. Ethan still visited the diner, but now he sat wherever there was space, sometimes with Lila joining him after her shift. Some nights they attended galas together, Lila radiant in a gown, Ethan proud to be at her side. Their worlds, her community, his empire, weren't seamless, but they were building something honest, something lasting. As they stood outside the community center on opening day, Lila took Ethan's hand, her eyes bright. We did this, she said, her voice full of pride. We did, he agreed, squeezing her hand. And we're just getting started. Shabby. This is the end of Ethan and Lila's journey, a story of love that overcame secrets, class, and pride. They found something money can't buy, a connection built on trust and respect. If their dance under the fairy lights warmed your heart, hit that subscribe button to catch more stories like this. What did you learn from Ethan and Lila? Would you have given him another chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep the conversation going.